And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining our platform today, where we are elevating the cause of constitutional conservatism, expanding like wildfire across the state of Louisiana, and slowly but surely, day by day, draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom, brought to you by Louisiana First listeners just like you. Hello, State of Freedom family. Thank you for inviting us to join you for a few minutes of your day. We love getting to spend time with you. We are only here, and I can't say it enough, because of your encouragement, because of your prayers and your financial support. If you are looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. And a reminder, which I know this audience needs not, but a reminder that Election Day is November 18th. And as before, we are encouraging all State of Freedom listeners and your families to please make a plan to vote in person on Election Day if you can. If you can't, please vote any way you can vote. Today, we are going to be discussing our runoff endorsements and amendment recommendations. These final races will really make the critical difference, as you all know, in the makeup of the culture of the legislature. So please text or email a link of our endorsement and amendment recommendations to your friends and family members. I know people are reaching out to you. They're reaching out to us saying, what are you doing on these amendments? Who are we supposed to vote for? What do these people stand for? If you have conservative family members, friends, neighbors, just send them the link. We'll make it easy for you. It's freedomstate.us/endorsements, or just send them to the website. It's very clear where to look up the endorsements, and hopefully we can get some more conservative voters out there to vote in an informed way. As a reminder, you can also send them short, really powerful clips of the interviews of these candidates from our YouTube and Rumble channels. Both the YouTube and Rumble links are on the website and in the show notes, so you can find them there. And before we get into the discussion, let's start with the scripture of the day. And really, I'd just like to remind the listeners and explain to new listeners why we start out with scripture. It's because scripture is the foundation for our values and our beliefs. And if we want to have a God-centered worldview, if we want to be looking at things through the appropriate lens, we have to be rooted in scripture. So today's verses are from Psalm chapter 116. They are verses 8 through 11. And it says, God has rescued my soul from death's fear and dried my eyes of many tears. He's kept my feet firmly on his path and strengthened me so that I may please him and walk before Yahweh in his fields of life. Even when it seems I'm surrounded by many liars and my own fears, and though I'm hurting in my suffering and trauma, I will stay faithful to God and speak words of faith. And this is a passage of praise to God. It's a passage of testimony of the faithfulness of the Lord. For the author, I saw this as like a stone of remembrance testimony, where he lays out the story of a very desperate time in his life and how the Lord came through. He talks about how the Lord enabled him and strengthened him to stay the course of his calling, and how in response, the psalmist will be faithful to the Lord. So let me encourage you today, consider some of the stones of remembrance testimonies in your life. Write them down and remind yourself, your friends, and your family about those times in your life when all hope seemed lost, when things were dire, but the Lord came through for you. This is how we strengthen ourselves in the Lord. It's how we refocus our minds, how we firmly reestablish the centrality of God's faithfulness and our faith in him. And this is a time, I know you can feel it, this is a time when we need to be rock solid in our faith, and recounting the faithfulness of the Lord is how we get there.
Absolutely. It's so important to look back during moments of crisis, moments of even despair, and recount times when you've been in similar situations and the Lord brought you through against all hope. Somehow he found a way when you felt there was no way. And writing down and recalling those moments help to give us hope during any moments of despair that people may be feeling now. Because, my gosh, there are people who are in deep despair about the state of the world, about the state of their own lives now. We just have to remember that if we can pour it out to him and be honest about everything in our lives, he will always pull us through. I mean, the scripture says that the Lord is always close to the brokenhearted, and he will never spurn those who are crushed in spirit. It's almost like we have to be crushed in spirit in order to be able to pour our hearts out to God the way he wants us to. And so we have to be at the bottom. We have to be desperate almost to reach to him so that we can come to know our total dependence upon him. And then once he responds and once he pulls us through, then we walk in the sunshine with him again. And I know that David experienced exactly what we're talking about here. That's why he's such a powerful figure in Scripture, because he knew what despair felt like, but he also knew what the hope of God felt like when God pulled him through his difficulties.
Yeah, I love that, Chris. I love your perspective. And I don't think we absolutely have to hit rock bottom from God's perspective, but as humans, it seems that's where we end up. It's where we end up somehow.
Somehow it does. You're right. We don't necessarily have to be there, but some are just determined to be there. And boy, I tell you what, that really is when God has the ability to speak to us. And he's just got to kind of purify us of some of the disordered addictions or attachments that we have. And sometimes he's got to do it. But anyway, we have some good things to talk about today as far as some runoff endorsements, Danielle, and a couple of non-endorsements.
Yeah. Well, they're two sides of the same coin, really, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
Well, look, up front, I just want to say that this runoff election, we are expecting, I don't know if we're experiencing yet, we're expecting a very low turnout. That's what we have been hearing. And I think the last election showed us that. I mean, I was not expecting low turnout. I thought people were just saying that, but we had tremendously low turnout, somewhere in the mid-30s, I think. And I think, Chris, you and I have talked extensively about this, and our position is that low turnout favors favors those who turn out. So we got to get out. We got to vote. We got to motivate our friends and neighbors who are conservative minded to go and press the buttons.
Absolutely. And you just got to go vote. I know that there are other things going on. The start of deer season. I think LSU has a home game that weekend, but nonetheless, it is very, very important because these races, as you've mentioned before, Danielle, particularly these legislative races, this will turn the tide. If these endorsed candidates that we're going to talk about today get in there, it will make a huge difference in returning the legislature to the citizens. There's just nothing more important that people can do. It doesn't take long to do it. There was a great sacrifice paid so that we would have the right to go and vote for our elected officials. Please take the time to go vote. Please take the time to go vote.
Yes, indeed. And now let's just kick it off, Chris. We have a couple of races, runoffs for statewide office. The first one we're going to discuss is the Secretary of State race, and we're not endorsing in this race. Neither candidate has expressed interest in cleaning up the election process, including voter rolls, the vulnerability of the machines, and making the elections auditable. Because as we've learned from Brandon Trosclair and Randy Russ and other experts, we are the only state in the union whose elections are not auditable. But that being said, Nancy Landry got a little bit over 19% of the vote. She's the Republican, almost the incumbent, because she comes from the office of the Secretary of State. And Gwen Collins Greenup got a little bit over 19% of the vote. She's a Democrat. Chris, I know you and I have spent some time today talking about this race. And while we're not endorsing, we do have some pretty strong opinions.
Actually, Danielle, I'm pretty conflicted on this because on the one hand, you have a really an establishment Republican who has not really expressed any interest, as you said, in cleaning up our voting system, in addressing the colossally overinflated voter rolls in Louisiana, hundreds of thousands of people on our voter rolls who shouldn't be there. The fact that our machine-based voting system in Louisiana is acutely vulnerable to hacking and manipulation. And the fact that, as you said also, our votes are not auditable. Those are three critically important issues that go directly to the integrity of our election system. And Nancy Landry has expressed little or no interest in doing anything about that. On the other hand, you have Greenup, who's the Democrat candidate in the runoff, who it would be difficult to imagine her having the power or the capacity to do anything about those issues, because in all likelihood, she's going to be controlled by a powerful national Democrat Party, if not a powerful state Democratic Party, if not both. So even if she were inclined to do something about those issues, she would probably be very restricted in her ability to do so. So what do you do in a situation like this? Like I said, I'm very conflicted. I guess that I would grudgingly have to vote for Nancy Landry, because at least she has expressed a position against the ballot harvesting. At least she has expressed a position that she's opposed to all of the mail-in ballots and all of this, and is very just as Secretary Kyle Ardwin was. So to that extent, I suspect she would be the preferable candidate. I'm sure she's opposed to the foreign dark money in our election system. That was the subject of a constitutional amendment that passed in October. But, so it is, I'm very conflicted about the race. I think she is far less than an ideal candidate to be Secretary of State, but I'm not sure that we really have any other choice. That's sort of my analysis.
And Chris, I just got back from the Wall Builders Conference in Dallas, and they put it to us in no uncertain terms. They said every single race is you're voting for the lesser of two evils, because we're voting for imperfect people, because no one is perfect. The point is, we have to get out and vote for the better candidate, because the alternative is why we are where we are today. So if people are apathetic and if people aren't willing to vote even for the lesser of two evils, we end up with the evilest of the evils.
The evilest. I love that. And whoever said that on the State of Freedom, we can't coin our own language and our own terminology. I will never be the evilest. But let me say one other thing about this, Danielle, just on the flip side of it. If Greenup happens to win this, it could cause a major meltdown in the Republican Party. And who knows, maybe it could motivate them to actually do something constructive about the election system if Greenup wins. So maybe there's a silver lining there as well. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Perhaps. I'm not that optimistic about Republicans coming to the idea that election integrity is important, because I just think that if they've been presented, this particular group of people, including Nancy Landry, have been presented with all the evidence. So what is going to change their mind now?
Very true. And don't let anybody ever suggest that they haven't been presented with the evidence, because they have. They know full well what the issues are. But it's the big, big, fat elephant in the room that they do not want to address and don't want to pay attention to.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears to the Attorney General race. Liz Murrill, who we endorsed wholeheartedly in the first round, is facing a Democratic opponent in the runoff. Her opponent's name is Lindsay Cheek. Liz got 45% of the vote. Lindsay got 23%. And look, I mean, the reasons we're supporting Liz, now there couldn't be a more polar opposite race to the one we just mentioned. We are wholeheartedly supporting Liz. Liz has stood up. She's fought for us. She's fought for the people of this state on censorship, on COVID vaccines, and on personal liberties issues across the board. And she has committed to continue to fight for us should she get the seat. So I'm very happy to be going to the polls for her.
100% courageous constitutional conservative, understands the Constitution, and may have been, Danielle, one of the first ones at the GOP convention to sign the LeCag pledge.
She certainly signed it the biggest.
Well, she signed it, and I think she was the only one to actually write a note on the side just for emphasis. What did it say?
100%.
She said 100% on the side just to make sure that her signature was legible. 100% we're ready to go on this. So as Attorney General, I can tell you right now, if they try to lock us down or they try to engage in these coercive mandates again or try to violate the Constitution like that, I guarantee you that Liz Muriel is going to stand up, and it's good to know that we'll have somebody there who will do that. This is just an absolute no-brainer. She's going to be a great attorney general for the citizens, for the people.
Yeah, and she's not just a fighter, she's a competent fighter, right? She's a fighter who has victories under her belt. She's proven, and I think the world of her. So I'm cheering her on wholeheartedly.
And me too. And quite courageously, her son, as you know, and as she's talked about publicly, is vaccine injured. And she has publicly stated that. And that is a strong motivation, I'm sure, for her to fight against and oppose any future type vaccine mandates.
Yeah, certainly. Now, the last race that's statewide that we're taking a look at is treasurer, and we are supporting John Fleming. He's facing a Democrat in the runoff, Dustin Granger. Fleming got 44% of the vote in October. Granger got 32%. And there is a whole host of reasons why we're standing behind John Fleming. He is a really impressive, really, I think, conscience-driven conservative, Chris.
Yeah, and a military veteran, served in the U.S. Congress for 10 or 11 years, was one of the founding members of the Freedom Caucus in the U.S. Congress, with guys like Jim Jordan and Congressman Meadows, the conservative caucus in the U.S. Congress. He served in the Trump administration, was a senior advisor to President Trump. Yeah, his conservative bona fides are really unquestionable. And I think a solid man based on his background, been married for 44 years, has kids, grandkids, just a fundamentally decent man and a real conservative. And I don't think there's any question that we need to be supporting John Fleming for treasurer.
That's awesome. I'm excited. I'm excited at the prospect of having him. We need somebody to whip our budget into shape. It'll take him and a conservative legislature and a good governor to get it done. So I think if everything goes according to our endorsements, if everything goes the way we're hoping it will go, we will have the elements to get that. We'll have the elements to get our house in order.
No doubt about it.
That's exciting. Okay, speaking of getting the house in order, House districts that we are supporting, we'll start with District 18. The plot thickens in this race. This is Tammy Fobb, who we're supporting. She is running against Jeremy Lacombe, who we'll get to in just a second. But the area that District 18 covers is Point Coupee, West Feliciana, West Baton Rouge, and Iberville. So it covers a lot of territory. Lacombe got 43% of the vote in the October race. Fobb got 37%. And we've endorsed Tammy from the beginning. We've had her on the show a couple of times. She wants to make Louisiana an attractive investment destination. She wants to make it economically competitive in the region. And Jeremy Lacombe, as folks probably remember, was the Democrat who ran against Caleb Kleinpeter and lost for state senate, and then suddenly switched party affiliations with no sign of heartfelt change, either in written statements or in his voting record. And now he's running to hold on to his state rep seat.
Yeah, and his switch to the Republican Party after getting spanked by Caleb Kleinpeter was just a clear political calculation. He saw the writing on the wall and realized that he would also lose his state rep seat unless he switched parties and at least postured to be more conservative, which is exactly what he did. But as you said, he did not announce it, didn't let anybody know. He just did it very quietly. So now he is a quote unquote Republican running to save his House seat against Tammy Fobb, who is a real conservative who's come on the show, talked about some sensible solutions to the insurance issues that we have, the skyrocketing insurance rates, how people are losing their homes because they can't afford the property insurance. And she's in the real estate business, so she understands exactly what's going on in that area. She talked about significantly reducing the state income tax, would be open to abolishing it, and other issues. She is solid. And by the way, Senator Caleb Kleinpeter is openly endorsing Tammy Fobb, the new up and coming state senator Caleb Kleinpeter, who beat Lacombe, is openly endorsing and supporting Tammy Fobb. So she is clearly the preferable candidate. Lacombe, on the other hand, has a sordid history of voting against his constituents' interests. We've talked about this multiple times, from the World War II bill to the Fairness in Women's Sports legislation back in 2022, to so many other things that we could go over. He is not a Republican. He is a leftist Democrat trying to pass himself off as a conservative, and it's not going to work. And most recently, Danielle, in fact, just a couple of hours ago, we received word that Lacombe may be so desperate in this runoff race that he is actually paying people to ballot harvest in his runoff campaign. By ballot harvesting, I mean paying people to go and retrieve ballots from voters from their homes or business place or wherever they are, and go deliver those ballots either to the post office or to a mailbox or whatever. We do not know for certain yet whether that is illegal, but we have reason to believe that it is, that ballot harvesting in Louisiana is illegal, and certainly illegal if you're paying someone on your staff to do it. Certainly, it does not look good politically, and it may well be illegal. It is certainly unethical.
Absolutely, and it rings of the 2000 Mules documentary that came out a year or two ago, and I just think it'll be very, very interesting to watch where this goes. I don't think that the people of New Roads are too excited about this. I don't think the people of Point Coupee, West Feliciana, West Baton Rouge, Iberville, I don't think the constituents of District 18 will be too thrilled to see that someone is maybe working to cook the books, potentially through illegal means. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. We have not confirmed, but we've heard through our exceedingly effective grapevine that there may be some actual video surveillance evidence of some of this activity. So stay tuned. You may be hearing about this on the news.
Indeed. Now, moving on to District 53, that's my district, which covers Terrebonne and Lafourche. We are endorsing Dirk Guidry. We endorsed Willis Trosclair in the earlier race, and Willis got knocked out. Unfortunately, Jessica Domain got 43% of the vote. Dirk Guidry got 36% of the vote. And we're endorsing Dirk because he has a long history of serving the people of his parish, serving the people specifically of his parish council district. He served on parish council for quite a few years, and he worked around the clock in the recovery efforts from Hurricane Ida, which our communities are still feeling the effects of. And I just think, Chris, that he's going to go to Baton Rouge with the heart of a servant for the people of District 53. People really have seen him out there working on their behalf. They know that they can pop into his pizza restaurant, talk to him face to face. If they can call him, and he will do whatever he can do to help them out. So that's Dirk Guidry, and we are looking forward to seeing him pull it out in November.
He sounds like, I have met Dirk once when I came down and spoke at We the People, and I was very impressed when I met him. And based on what you're describing, it's like the people in Terrebonne and Lafourche have actually seen him sacrifice his time, his resources, and his energy to help other people simply because they needed the help, not because what he could get out of it. That's what sort of I'm getting from you about Dirk.
Yes, I heard from him that not just from him, but from others as well, that during the Hurricane Ida recovery efforts, he was tireless. People had to tell him, stop, you have to eat, you have to sleep. He just wanted to make sure that the people who were so affected in his district, tremendous, tremendous damage was wrought through his parish council district for sure, and the entirety of District 53 was totally disrupted and beyond, of course. But yeah, Dirk, I think was even given an award for his efforts.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound to me, Danielle, like he's going to be the kind of guy who will go into the legislature and compromise his fidelity to his constituents. He strikes me as someone who would have the backbone to stay faithful to the people who elected him.
I believe so. And I really hope that we can connect him with some other great Louisiana First candidates, because I'd love to see him just aligned with the people who we know are bringing great legislation and have great ideas.
Absolutely.
Okay, on to District 64. We are endorsing Kelly Hennessy Dickerson. She's in Livingston Parish. She is running against Kelly Alford, who got 30% of the vote, and Kelly Hennessy Dickerson got 49% of the vote. Chris, I think both are probably really great candidates. So this one was a really tough call for us to make.
It was a very tough call to make, and frankly, I think Kelly Alford would probably do a very good job as a state rep. We sent a survey to Kelly, and I think followed up Kelly Alford, and we didn't get a response to the survey. We did get a response from Kelly Dickerson, and that's really what solidified our endorsement of Kelly. Also, she was attacked by some establishment members, some bogus ethics allegations against her, and she stood up strong and fought back, which I respected and admired a great deal. So anytime you get sort of attacked by the establishment, to me, that raises a candidate's stature in my eyes. And that's what happened with her. She just seems like a fighter, a true conservative. So that's why we supported her. But again, I think Kelly Alford would probably do a good job as well. It's nice to be in a situation where either party who wins, in all likelihood, would serve well.
Yes, I think that's a positive thing. And, I do feel a little torn on this one, because I know that these candidates get so many surveys whenever they file. So I get that, things go to junk mail, and there could be any number of reasons maybe Kelly Alford didn't fill out our survey, but those are the metrics we have. It's an imperfect system, and that's, that was the basis for which we had to make a lot of decisions. This wasn't obviously the only race we were weighing in on. We had a lot of races, as you all know. So I think, I wish both of them the best in this race, but we have endorsed Dickerson. Now, on to 65. This is someone we've heard from recently, Lauren Ventrella. She's District 65 covers East Baton Rouge. We've got a lot of East Baton Rouge candidates. This East Baton Rouge district covers mainly the town of Central. In October, Lauren scored 28% of the vote, and Brandon Ivey, who's her opponent in the runoff, got 32% of the vote. And I think just from hearing from her recently, she's passionate. She's doing this for the right reasons, and she's really prepared to fight, I think, Chris, for the future of our state.
She's never run for office before, which, as far as I'm concerned, militates strongly in her favor. She's very much of an outsider. Her husband is a member of the military who suffered through all of the vaccine nonsense in the military. So she's very pro-freedom when it comes to the medical coercion. She's a constitutional scholar and a constitutional lawyer, and I just believe in giving someone like her a chance. And I've known her personally for many years and know her to be an honest and very straightforward person who remain true to her ideals. But it's not even so much Lauren, it is the fact that she's running against someone who really is part of the establishment, Brandon Ivey, not because he himself has run for office and he is a Republican, but his brother Barry Ivey has served for many years in the state legislature and really has not been a faithful constitutional conservative at all. In fact, he has been an impediment to the passage of good, solid conservative legislation. And he has actually promoted very bad legislation. Barry Ivey was one of the ones who voted out of committee this atrocious 490 bill in 2023 that would have allowed the third-party hack groups to go into high schools and basically harvest votes from impressionable high school seniors with no scrutiny and no oversight whatsoever. That was Barry Ivey, Brandon's brother.
Twin brother.
twin brother. And I know it's not fair to extrapolate, but look, I'm sorry, but it is reasonable to at least consider that relationship in terms of trying to guess how Brandon may legislate. And that's not a risk that I'm willing to take.
And Chris, I think Lauren's positions stand tall enough for me. I mean, I think that she's passionate. I thought that she was very energetic, and I can see that. I think she's got a backbone of steel, and I think she's got fire in her belly. She's ready to do what it takes to turn this state around, and I think that's the kind of energy, and that's the kind of fresh ideas that we're going to need to move things forward in a way that's not going to take 100 years.
Absolutely, and has a real, as a lawyer, has a real understanding of the Constitution and understands when the government or the state is overstepping its bounds into the realm of civil liberty and civil freedom, and that is so important that we have someone with that breadth of knowledge and background in the legislature.
Yes. Now, on to 66. This is another East Baton Rouge district, and we are supporting Emily Chenevier. She came on not too long ago either, in the last couple of weeks, and Emily got 32% of the vote in October. Richie Edmonds, her Republican opponent, got 27%, and look, Emily was such a fantastic interview. I mean, she's already been fighting for children. She's been fighting for family values. She's been fighting for personal liberty. And I think she's just going to keep that up when she gets to Baton Rouge.
She may be the most impressive guest that we've had. So articulate, so passionate, and I loved the fact that she invoked the name of her husband and her family so often as her anchor and her background and her support. I think that's so important when you're serving in public office to have that kind of anchor and that kind of support system. I was so impressed with the way that she has run her campaign. She has kept everything positive, and it just has refused to reduce herself to any negative level. She is just, and very importantly, also the listeners need to know that she is one of the founding members of probably the most vocal and prominent pro-family child protection organization in the state, if not in the country, which is Moms for Liberty. They have done so much good to protect the purity and the innocence of the Louisiana and the American family, and to protect students against radical indoctrination in schools. So she's put her money where her mouth is long before she ever ran for office as part of Moms for Liberty. She's also been heavily involved in prohibiting, eliminating this child sex trafficking across the borders. Just really, really an impressive figure long before she ever ran for office. She's not running for this office for a check. She's not running for status. She's running because her heart and her Lord are calling her to do it. And I could not be more impressed by her.
Yep, same here. I just really enjoyed talking to her, and I love, one thing that we have seen as a common theme amongst quite a number of our of the candidates we've endorsed is the feeling that it's a call from the Lord, which you just mentioned, Chris. Their faith has been such a central part of their life that this was not some kind of flip, ego-driven thing to run for office. This is something that they're doing out of duty, out of obedience, and out of a call. And that means so much. And I just think it comes across. You can tell the authenticity of that. It's not just a talking point for her.
It's really not. You can tell she speaks from the heart. And I do want to mention this also about her opponent. I runoff opponent. I don't know him. I don't know Richie Edmonds, and I'll tell you that, as you know, Danielle, we endorsed his dad in his state Senate race against Barry Ivy. So this is nothing against the Edmonds family, but I've heard on very good authority that Richie Edmonds is suggesting that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has endorsed him in this runoff race. And I've heard on very good authority that the language and the photo that Richie Edmonds used of he and Mike Johnson was not authorized by Mike Johnson.
Wow.
And so It absolutely did not have the authority to do that. And Mike Johnson has not, in fact, endorsed Richie Edmonds for this runoff seat.
That's cringeworthy. That's really low. I mean, good grief.
Yeah, so it is important to point that out. Again, I don't know Richie Edmonds, but it's misleading at best, and the voters absolutely have a right to know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think there are a lot of people after Mike Johnson was named speaker that, pulled their pictures out and of themselves with Mike Johnson just to, to let their friends know, hey, this is someone I've met. This is someone that I've had the opportunity to shake his hand and tell him that I think he's doing a great job. That's very different. That's very different from saying that this person endorses me. In fact, Chris, we even wanted to remind our listeners that we spoke to Mike Johnson and we interviewed him quite a couple weeks ago, actually not that long ago, but it was during our election integrity series. It was episode 55. So if any of our listeners missed that or want to listen to it again, I think his heart was so pure. And you could just tell that he was a man who has an extremely calm demeanor. I think he's someone who probably brings a lot of peace to the floor of the House, to the running of our legislature in Washington. And I think that it's really disappointing that someone would want to put, words in his mouth, basically.
Absolutely, no question about it, and it's just unfortunate, and Mike certainly did say that he wishes Emily the very very best. He absolutely said that to me, in fact, that he wishes Emily the very very best in her race, and we can say that on very good authority.
Well, wonderful. Why don't we shift gears, Chris, and continue on the East Baton Rouge Trail with District 68. This is Dixon McMakin is who we have endorsed for this race. He got 31, a little close to 32% of the vote in October. His Democratic opponent, Belinda Creel Davis, got 31% of the vote. I mean, they're kind of neck and neck there. Dixon, he's a passionate, energetic guy, and he told us he's about infrastructure. He's social and fiscal conservative. And this is the thing that impressed me the most about him. He wants his constituents to hold him accountable, and he is putting in measures to make that happen.
Absolutely. And this is a no brainer here. This is a no brainer. Dixon McMakin is a true conservative, very impressed with his volunteer work. He volunteers in a group called Fraternus to help young men between the ages of 14 and 18 and 19 grow up to be good, virtuous young men. Volunteers countless hours of his time at his church in order to be father figures and to mold these young men the way they should be. He didn't get paid for that, and he was doing it long before he ran for office. He loves people, and he feels like he's got a responsibility to help his community. And of course, he is a true conservative running against a radical Democrat. I happen to be the unfortunate recipient of Belinda Davis's mailers here at my house, Danielle, because I live in this district. I'll be voting for Dixon McMakin. So anyway, I have read some of her mailers, and they are clearly evidence of the fact that she is by no means a conservative. She is a leftist Democrat, and she should not be elected to the state legislature. Hopefully, Dixon McMakin walks in there with no problem on November 18th.
We shall see, but I hope so too. Now, the last district in East Baton Rouge that we're going to cover today is District 70. And this is a wild card, Chris, but we're supporting Steve Myers, who is the Democrat, but against all odds. But Barbara Freiberg is just so awful. She has a voting record of voting against parental rights, against family values, and against supporting our police force. And Steve happens to be a conservative Democrat, an actual old school blue dog Democrat. So it's against all odds, but we are supporting the Democrat in this race. In October, Freiberg got 39% of the vote, and Steve got 27% of the vote.
Yes, the Dino versus the Rhino. This may be, Danielle, the one of the first time. Oh, this may be the first time that we've actually endorsed a Democrat on our show. But
But look, we
we
can do it.
we absolutely can do it, and I have absolutely no problem doing it when it's appropriate to do so. And this is clearly one of those races. And every one of our listeners, please go to therealbarbarafreiberg.com. That's therealbarbarafreiberg.com, and you want to talk about a Rhino voting record, really, to call her record Rhino is really an insult to rhinos because it is really that bad. We don't need to go over all of it now, but she is no conservative, even though she's trying to suggest to the conservative voters in District 70 that she's a conservative. But the realbarbarafreiberg.com will tell you everything you need to know about Barbara Freiberg. And then, as you said, Steve Myers, the Democrat, who is a blue dog Democrat, very conservative, very pro life, very pro family, and fiscally conservative as well. He will bring a conservative outlook and philosophy to the state legislature and be a far, far improvement over Barbara Freiberg. The voters in District 70 must know that they have an opportunity to elect a true conservative Democrat. And Republicans, Danielle, to my knowledge and my experience, I've been a Republican my whole life. I don't know many Republicans who have any problem voting for a Democrat if they're the better candidate.
Yeah, and this is one of those races, Chris, where we need informed voters to turn out. And so sending people to the realbarbarafreiberg.com is spot on. We need people who understand Barbara's record to get into the voting booth and vote against her, basically.
Yes, and just to know how vulnerable she is, Danielle, 62% of the voters in District 70 in the primary voted for somebody other than Barbara Freiberg. They wanted somebody besides Barbara Freiberg. 39% she has going into a runoff. That is vulnerable. That is very vulnerable. And so I think people do know and are understanding more and more exactly what her record is. And if the voters know, particularly the Republican voters know when they go vote exactly what that record is, contrary to what she's trying to tell them, she cannot win and she should not win.
And you know, Chris, it really does just burn me up when these politicians straight up lie about their voting record, when they completely misrepresent and mischaracterize the way that they have been representing their constituents. It makes me so furious because I'm like, if that's the way that you thought you should behave, then you should have voted that way. You need to stand by your vote, ma'am.
Exactly. That's one of the things that Danielle, that Katie, my wife Katie, is like. It's one thing to vote a certain way and then claim and own your votes. It's another thing to vote and act a certain way in the legislature and then totally and blatantly misrepresent it when you're running for reelection. That's the very reason why LeCag exists. That's the
You
very
can't
reason
have it
why
both ways.
you can't.
Yes. No, you cannot have your cake and eat it too. I'm sorry. That makes me so mad. So I'm going to move on because I don't want to tear up Barbara Freiberg all day.
Okay.
Um,
I'll reluctant. We can reluctantly move on.
okay, we will. Now to District 90, which is St. Tammany. And we had Brian Glorioso on recently. He was someone I really enjoyed interviewing, Chris. He's in a runoff against Mary DuBesson, and she's also a piece of work. I'm not going to lie. She tried to bring casinos to St. Tammany, and she had the audacity to sponsor pro-abortion legislation. And you, when we were talking about this before the show, you reminded me that she was also absent for the vote to prohibit foreign enemies from buying our land. So in October, Mary got 48% of the race, 48% of the vote. I'm not sure how. Brian got 44%, and then the Libertarian kind of got the rest of the votes. So I'm very hopeful that those Libertarians get out and vote for Brian Glorioso.
Absolutely, and it's just important. It's important for the voters to know not only that Brian is a Reagan conservative. In fact, he invoked Reagan's name several times while he was on the show. I think Ronald Reagan has had a profound influence on Brian Glorioso in his life and certainly his political philosophy. Very impressive guest. We have to remember also that Mary DuBesson, as you said, did everything she could to get casinos to St. Tammany Parish, which the voters overwhelmingly rejected. She was completely absent in 2020 with regard to the COVID lockdowns and trying to get the state reopened. Just AWOL, nowhere to be found. And as you mentioned a minute ago, Danielle, she sponsored the pro-abortion legislation in the recent 2023 session that fortunately was killed in the Criminal Justice Committee because of overwhelming opposition by the Louisiana Right to Life movement. But she was pushing it. She wanted it. And as Brian and you discussed when he was on the show, that legislation, whether she knew it or not, would have broadened, certainly would have created a loophole that would have gotten more and more and more broad and ultimately would have led to abortion on demand again in Louisiana. That's what that legislation would have done. And she has to own that. We could sit and talk about multiple other votes regarding Mary DuBesson, but clearly she needs to go. It's time for her to go. We need Brian Glorioso in the legislature, and we got to get him in there.
Well, I hope to see him. I hope that he gets across the post. I think he has every reason to. He also brought a lot of great ideas to the show, Chris, and I think that he will be a breath of fresh air as well.
Absolutely. Very, very excited to see what the next, I guess we're at 9 or 10 days holds. And I guarantee you that he is pounding the pavement right
Yep,
now.
I bet he is. Now, to our last candidate endorsement in the House, we have District 103, which is St. Bernard, and that is Mike Bayham. And what a fantastic interview that was. I mean, just to hear him talk about his process for deciding to run, how the founders factored in, how the Lord factored in, his faith, and how he weighed the cost very, very seriously before running. And he's someone, Chris, that we've talked to. He's a long-time conservative. He's been involved in Louisiana and national politics for many years. And I just thought the world of him. I thought that he did a fantastic job on our interview, and he did a fantastic job in October as well. He got 47% of the vote, and his opponent, Republican Richie Lewis, got 32% of the vote. So Bayham is very well positioned for this November race.
I think he is in a good position. I'm sure he's out there working hard. One of the things that I'll always remember when I think about Mike Bayham is really the coincidence, and it's not really a coincidence because God really doesn't deal in coincidences. But I thought it was so interesting that your scripture of the day, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but lose his soul? And then Mike said, it's so interesting that would be your scripture of the day because that is my political foundational philosophy. It's what guides me every day in politics is to keep me humble and to understand that, this world ultimately is not our true country and our true home. But to me, I think it's very impressive and very unusual that someone who's aspiring to political office would have a philosophy that really it provides a foundation of true humility and a recognition that there is a cause greater than himself. And I love his foundation in humility. I also love the fact that you talked about his experience with COVID. And despite the fact that he takes it very seriously. In fact, he had COVID a couple of times and he was very ill from it. He is very, very strong against any kind of government coercive action when it comes to these medical procedures or lockdowns or masks or any of that. And I know that he will stand strong for the citizens on those issues.
Yes. And back to the scripture of the day thing, just before we move on, Chris, I really hope, and I have to think that moment was a good confirmation for him that he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he needed to be doing, and that I think it was a sign of the Lord's pleasure on his campaign and on his obedience. So,
A little wink and a nod from the Almighty.
yes, absolutely. I can't think of it any other way. Well, let's turn to the constitutional amendments. I know people are very eager to hear about this. Chris, you spent some time delving into this. You are the legal half of this team, and I'm so grateful for that. Getting into amendment number 1, this is about the veto override process, and we are recommending a yes vote on that one. Tell us what that means.
A yes vote on this, Danielle, basically means that it's going to be easier for the legislature to override a governor's veto. And as far as I'm concerned, that is a good thing. Historically in Louisiana, the governor has enjoyed far disproportionate power and authority and control over the legislature. So anything that gives the legislature more flexibility is a good thing. And in this case, it would give them more flexibility in being able to override a governor's veto of a bill. And, if they're already in a legislative session, why not allow them to take a vote and override a governor's veto in that session rather than having to call a separate veto override session? It just saves time, saves resources, and again, makes it less procedurally difficult to override vetoed bills. It's a good amendment, and we're urging a yes vote.
And Chris, just a small aside on the constitutionality of this, I would begin to think that this is an example of a good amendment, right? This is changing a constitutional process. It belongs in the Constitution as an amendment. If they were to put it in any other way, the governor could veto it. So that also stands to reason why they would make it as an amendment.
Well, absolutely. In fact, they couldn't pass this legislatively because it would be on its face unconstitutional because it contradicts what's in the Constitution right now, which is why it has to be amended in the Constitution. But you're exactly right. This is something that does properly belong in the Constitution. And again, I hope that it passes.
Wonderful. Now, Amendment 2 seems just like it's kind of clearing out some old funds from the Louisiana state constitution, and we're also recommending a yes vote on this, but tell us more about what this means.
These are just old extant funds in the Constitution that don't exist anymore, they don't have any money anymore, and they just need to be removed from the Constitutions because these funds no longer exist. I talked to Beryl Amity about this, the great representative from down in your area, and she said that she sort of likens this amendment to cleaning out your refrigerator of old, stale food. And this is certainly not all of the old, stale food that needs to be cleaned out of our Constitution, but certainly it's a start.
It's a start. Great. Now, on to Amendment 3. It's related to property tax exemptions for first responders, and we kind of have a neutral stance on this one.
Yeah, sort of neutral on this. The negative part of it is that it creates sort of a special class of citizens who would benefit from an additional property tax exemption. Police, firefighters, other first responders. We love our first responders, but the idea of creating a special class of citizens who are eligible for property tax exemptions, we don't think that is fair. It's probably a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution, and in all likelihood, it would lead to other state employees clamoring for the same exemptions, like teachers, mental health experts, counselors. So it would create a precedent in that regard as well. Danielle, I would support, I suspect you would support an amendment that eliminates property taxes for Louisiana citizens across the board. I would go for that all day long. Just don't believe the Constitution should be creating a special class of citizens with a privilege that's not enjoyed by all citizens. On the other hand, the good thing about this amendment is that it returns the power to make this decision to local governments. And as a constitutional conservative, I believe the more local the concentration of power is, the better. And that's a good thing because it allows the local authorities to make the decision. It decentralizes government power, and that's a good thing. So because the amendment has some good things, some bad things, we're neutral on this and encourage people to vote the way their conscience dictates on Amendment 3.
Very good. Chris, let me ask you before we move on, are the property taxes that this addresses, they're state taxes, right? So how does that square with returning this to the localities?
Well, because if you return, this constitutional amendment specifically says that, well, actually, no, to be honest with you, those are the local property taxes in a parish are local taxes, not state taxes. And yes, and so the local authorities would have the ability under this amendment to go in and eliminate the property and grant a property tax exemption for state for first responders who live in their parish, but they have to live in their parish.
Well, could the parish councils and the police juries just cancel property taxes for everybody at the local level anyway?
Yeah, you would think that they could. You would think that they could do that. But again, the issue is if they're going to do that, why would you not do it, I think, for all of the citizens?
Yeah. It's weird to me that this is happening at the state level if it's a local issue, and it's also, I appreciate your point on this being kind of to a targeted group of people. However selfless those people are, I just kind of think that our overburdening of taxes right now has reached just a breaking point, and I think we need something more than this. In my view, we need something a lot more than this.
Absolutely, but I take it, Danielle, that if there were a blanket property tax exemption for Louisiana citizens in a parish or even across the state, that you would probably be for that.
100%.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. All right, on to Amendment 4. This is something about funds that are being spent on that. Redirecting funds to be spent on budget deficit relief. And Chris, you're also recommending a yes vote on this.
Well, there's something called a Revenue Stabilization Trust Fund. And right now, that fund can only be used for capital outlay. Not exactly sure what capital outlay is. Nobody really defines that. Also for transportation projects and for emergencies. And I'm not sure what really qualifies as an emergency, but the RSTF fund can only go to those particular items. And the fund consists of taxes and from oil and gas production in Louisiana. There's a bunch of money in there. So a yes vote on this amendment would amend the Constitution to allow withdrawal from that fund of up to $250 million to alleviate a deficit in the budget. Right now, you can't use it for that purpose. You can't use any money from that fund for that purpose. And the appropriation, in order to appropriate that under this amendment, would require a 2/3 vote in the legislature. So even if the amendment passes, in order to get the money appropriated out of that fund, it would still have to go before the legislature and get a 2/3 vote. So we support this amendment because it authorizes the legislature to use a portion of that fund to alleviate deficits in the budget. And I think that is a good thing to do to try to alleviate budget deficits, number one. But number two, it allows the legislature to divert a portion of the fund away from things like capital outlay, which sounds to me like is a broad enough term to drive a truck through and could be used to squander money on basically what does not qualify on some level as capital outlay. Most everything is capital outlay. So anyway, you have that, and it would be able to divert some of this money away from those projects, including transportation projects, into filling gaps in the budget deficit. I think that's a good thing. That's why we support the amendment.
Yeah, I think capital outlay can be spelled PORK.
Oh my gosh, Danielle, that's exactly correct. Capital outlay, AKA pork.
But I also really love the idea if we can pay down the deficit, that frees up some of the funds that are being squandered on enormous interest rates, and we will ultimately have more money, it would stand to reason, to put back into the roads, which desperately need help. But I mean, we do have kind of a whack-a-mole problem here, right? There's so many areas that have been mismanaged and funds that have been misused and misappropriated that now we're in a situation where we're going to have to take a really cold, hard look at what truly needs to be done and how we can do that. And it might be a little painful for a little bit.
It might be. And, part of the reason why we're in the position that we're in, to shift gears just for a second here, but it is related. Part of the reason why we're in the situation that we're in is because we have elected people to our legislature and leaders in our state who've put us in this position. And that's why we exist, in order to get people in office to make changes so that we're not in this situation again in the future.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And this is a reminder that you have to show up to vote. You have to show up and you have to vote for the lesser of two evils. If you don't like either one of the candidates that's running, find a reason to vote for the slightly better one, because that may be the case you're in your district, and I feel for you if that's the case, but I feel for us worse if the worst person gets in. And so we just have to make tough choices. There are definitely some races where we have to pinch our nose and press the button, and that's just the reality of it. But there are also plenty of races where there are some really wonderful people in runoffs against really wonderful people. And that's the direction we want to see this state going. We want to see not the lesser of two evils. We want to see the best of two great candidates. That would be a better position to be in. And that's the direction that we're hoping to drive this state.
Yes, and that's basically what we have in the Hennessy-Alford race out in Livingston. Two great candidates. And Danielle, you're so right. We have a number of great candidates that we're supporting in runoff. So it's not really the matter of choosing a lesser of two evils, but there are some races where it clearly is choosing the lesser of two evils. And that's not an excuse not to vote. It's not an excuse not to participate, because, you don't always find angels in hell. And, in fact, it's rare to find angels in hell. And so sometimes you have to choose the least diabolical of the candidates, and you've got to make a vote.
And if you would like to support candidates who are doing the right thing, candidates who are Louisiana first and who have consistently, as incumbents, voted on behalf of the interests of their constituents in ways that move our state forward. And, if they're not incumbents, they have a track record of standing for what's right or appear to really be positioned to do the right things for us. On our behalf, you can donate to LCAG at lcag.org. And Chris, what is the P.O. Box?
P.O. Box 64952, Baton Rouge, Louisiana 70896, where we're elevating the cause of constitutional conservative candidates across the state, promoting them, supporting them through our infrastructure and our resources to return the legislature to the citizens of Louisiana. There's nothing more important that our listeners can do than donate to LCAG so that we can elevate these candidates and elect these candidates to office, because they are our representatives. And if we don't have faithful representatives serving us in the legislature, then Danielle, we are going to be in a bad situation. And we've already seen very bad situations that we're trying to change.
Yes, that's the damage we're trying to undo now. And if you would like to support us here at the State of Freedom, you can do that at freedomstate.us. You can also mail us directly at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana. Also, a reminder that the endorsement and amendment list is on the website at freedomstate.us. Please just go there, print out the sheet if you need to whenever you're going into the voter booth, especially for the amendments. I'm sure you have figured out who you're going to vote for in terms of your district race, but the amendments, it can be a little tricky. And sometimes they put in local measures to vote on, and so you kind of lose track of, where did the amendment stop and the local stuff start? So that'll just give you something good to have in your hand when you go into the booth. And Chris, before we leave, I'd like to also mention a new opportunity for any listener who may already be investing in precious metals, or may be interested in investing in precious metals, or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, which is actual dealer cost. And you can refer people to Metal Stacks as well for an additional income. If you're just interested in purchasing metals, you can visit metalstacks.com/D Walker. That helps me out. I get the commission. And Metal Stacks retail prices are extremely competitive. They are just beating the big sites, and they have no credit card fees and no minimums. So if you are interested in learning about the business aspect, you can email me directly at Danielle@freedomstate.us.
Very excited about this opportunity. As I told you, Katie's looking into this, and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, it's a great company. Fantastic.
I want to, Danielle, before we go, as always, just want to thank you for the privilege of being able to work with you on the State of Freedom. It's amazing how time flies. 88, 89 episodes, I lose track, but we are advancing the ball rapidly across the state. And I want to thank our donors. I want to thank our listeners for subscribing and sharing our show. We are truly revolutionizing the way political advocacy is done in Louisiana. We are becoming the go-to platform for constitutional conservatism. People who listen to our show, our program, our guests know that they are getting the unvarnished truth, that they can trust what we say, and they can act on what we say because it's based on the record of these elected officials and nothing more and nothing less. And so we are just very excited about continuing to move forward. I want to thank all of our listeners for all of their support. And I know, Danielle, that as we go forward each day, we will continue to be blessed, continue to expand, and continue to take great steps to preserve the state of freedom in Louisiana.
God bless you, Chris. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for listening to The State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to The State of Freedom, LLC, at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.